On today's show, Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals' first line fire.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the past 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Capitals' first line fire with Alex Ovechkin, Dylan Strome, and Tom Wilson. What made that line so dynamic and so offensive? I'll talk about that a bit later. We'll talk about Tom Wilson, the bounce back season as he put up career numbers. He thrived this last season. And what are some of the things we know about Tom Wilson is that he's not leaning into physicality as much as he used to. He understands who he is. He understands at the end of the day, he's a better goal scorer. And let's leave some of that fighting to someone else. I'll talk about that a bit later. We'll talk about Dylan Strome. Was it a breakout year or a beneficiary year? If you take a look at it, that Dylan Strome had a great season. I don't think anyone can argue about that. But what makes him so successful is that he is playing on that top line with Alex Ovechkin. I'll talk about that. But just to get it going here, talking about Ovi and that first line magic. If you take a look at Alex Ovechkin, he has surrounded himself for years with truly great players. And if you want to talk about centers here for a moment, well, Alex Ovechkin had good old number 19, Nick Backstrom, as his center for years. Assisted on more Alex Ovechkin goals than anyone else. So to say that when Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey, it left quite a void and a lot of questions for Alex Ovechkin and also questions about the first line for the Capitals. Who is going to be worthy or capable of such a task of assisting Alex Ovechkin? But Dylan Strome has definitely done that. And Tom Wilson, of course, is the mature Tom Wilson that we see nowadays, not necessarily the guy that is going to drop the mitts at a moment's notice. To be clear here, still has physicality, still is an intimidator, an antagonist, you could say. But at the end of the day, what you're seeing him mature into is more of a great goal scorer. And I think kind of distancing himself a little bit from the physicality. Now, to be clear here, I did say Ovechkin, Strome, and Wilson on the first line. We've also seen Protas. We've seen Beauvillier, different players mixed and matched. But I think the line that was the most dynamic with the players on the first line was Ovi, Strome, and Wilson. So let's dive into that. We'll talk about numbers. What did the first line do? And the players themselves, what kind of numbers did they put up? And what kind of correlation can you make with the fact that they played on that first line? So let's dive into that in segment 1. And before we get into it, I'm going to use some NHL stats. And usually I try to keep the show more just for your casual hockey fan or Capitals fan. But let's dive into the weeds here. Let's kick things off with a little numbers talk. Yeah, I know. Stay with me. I don't want to bore you with a bunch of percentages and that kind of thing. But I think it's important to understand certain metrics when you're talking about what works and what doesn't work. Because if we're going to review the Caps first line from top to bottom, well, we got to talk stats, but in a way that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So here are two that you're going to hear a lot today, and that is expected goals for percentage. And what that means, basically, it measures the quality and quantity of scoring chances a player is on the ice for. For example, a 50% means the ice is even. Above 50, you're helping. Below 50, well, not ideal. The next stat is relative expected goals for. That compares your performance to your teammates. Are you lifting them up or pulling it down? Again, I am saying those definitions loosely, but you get the gist of what I'm talking about here. So now that we've got our toolbox set, if you will, let's talk about the first line and what they were able to put up, because Alex Ovechkin, going into last season, 39 years old. Can you believe it? Any other person in life, you'd be like 39. I mean, I guess that's older. It's not that old. But when you talk about professional sports, you talk about hockey, and Alex Ovechkin turning 39 in October, he was so old, can he even do it anymore? Well, he can do just that. So let's get into it. We're going to start with the captain of course, Alex Ovechkin. Like I said, 39 years old to start last season, and well, is 39 years old right now. And you take a look at what he accomplished last season, and there was the whole talk, the whole season about, can he catch? Can he pass Gretzky? And then the incident happened where Jack McBain, from then called the Utah Hockey Club, now the Mammoth, it was a lower leg collision. And, well, Alex Ovechkin faced a fractured leg, a collective gasp among Capitals fans as we thought to ourselves, is this really how this is going to go down? He is chasing down Gretzky, and this Jack McBain from this, team in Utah. What is going on here? But, he missed 16 games with that broken leg and still scored 44 goals. At 39, missing 16 games, still put up 44 goals. What does Carlson say? What does Wilson, Oshie, all those guys say? Never doubt the big man. And what is that good for? That's the third most in the league. Let that sink in. At 39 years old, he passed Wayne Gretzky, 897 goals, the most ever. And that's quite an accomplishment. And, the thing of it is, and I think that, that weighed heavy on Alex Ovechkin, not just this past season, but the past, I'm going to say, couple seasons anyway, is the questions were always pointed. And it seemed like every time there was a post-game presser and say, Ovechkin scored a goal or two, or maybe say he was going through a drought, the questions would always go to, when do you think you can catch Gretzky? When do you think you can catch Gretzky? Gretzky. And it got to the point where he started deflecting and said, listen, I don't care about it anymore. I just want to win another cup. And you understand that's what it was, a deflection. Do I think that Alex Ovechkin wants to score another goal? Of course. Win another Stanley Cup? Of course. But I think that at the end of the day, the questions about Gretzky got to him. His wife even mentioned that as much. But 897, quite an accomplishment for what he's been able to put up. And the good thing about it is that last season, well, that wasn't a farewell tour. That wasn't your favorite band going on their last tour ever. He still has 1 year left under contract. And how far can he drive this one, out into the outfield and over the fence this next season? If there's anything that we know, 44 goals, I think that's something. If you're asking me, I do think that he takes a step back this next season. I would say 35 goals is what I've told some other podcasts out there. But at the end of the day, if he knocks it out of the park and scored 40 or 45 goals, I would love that. But Ovi had a 0.68 goals per game rate. Only Draisaitl was better. Let that sink in. And yet, even strength, he was lethal. He led the league in goals per 60 minutes. Not bad for a guy born in 1985. Yeah, let the math start to sink in there a little bit as well. But it wasn't all roses and daisies for Alex Ovechkin. The expected goals number, that is not one of the things I think he wants to talk about. They weren't great. Ovechkin posted a 45.4 GF rate at 5-on-5. That's the lowest among regular Caps forwards. And again, that's expected goals for percentage. But the team actually outscored opponents 59%. So this is oftentimes where there are extreme, hockey nerds that really like to dig into the numbers and they like to point to certain stats, lead to certain conclusions. Not always the case. Because the team outscored opponents 59% of the time when he was on the ice. So the numbers say one thing, and the scoreboard says something else, that even though he wasn't contributing in one aspect, just the very fact that he was there and playing, it contributed to the overall success of the Capitals as a whole. And that's Ovi in a nutshell, right? Defying expectations, making models look silly. Still the most dangerous shooter in the game when the puck is on his stick. And, like a lot of goalies say around the league, you know what's coming. There's just not a lot you can do to stop it. Now, I think that, goalies nowadays have gotten a lot better with it, but still, he can find the back of the net with the best of them. And by the way, if you want to talk about performing in clutch moments, he scored 2 playoff hat tricks, broke the game-winning goals record, and notched his first overtime playoff goal in Game 1 versus Montreal. So if you want to talk about clutch moments and stepping up big, that is what Alex Ovechkin does. When you really need to kick it into high gear, that's what he can do. And, he's still got it at the end of the day. That's the big thing. And here's the thing is, like I talked about, he's 39, going to be 40 in September. He still has the final season left on his contract and he's hinted at retirement. And I've given you my thoughts on his retirement. That even if he does retire at the end of next season, the mantle that he has a lot of trophies and a lot of accomplishments. The biggest, of course, is passing Gretzky, of course, in the 2018 Stanley Cup win. That at the end of the day, Alex Ovechkin is still the heartbeat of the Washington Capitals. The first line, left wing, dynamic. They don't make a lot of players like him anymore, and that is what truly makes him one of the key pieces of that Capitals first line. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Dylan Strome, breakout year or beneficiary, straight ahead. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with your friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. And oftentimes life is like that. I'm thinking about going to a baseball game, don't have tickets. But then I think to myself, Game Time. And tickets actually get cheaper closer to first pitch. There is so much to like here. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. There's so much to love. And they got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in segment 2 here, we're talking Dylan Strome, first line center. Wow, and just took his game to the next level this past season. A guy that was put on the scrap heap by the Chicago Blackhawks. The Capitals scooped him up and said, thank you very much, has been lights out for this team. Like I talked about in segment 1, he is the guy that picked up the torch when Nick Backstrom stepped away. And I don't think the Capitals saw that coming. It's just one of the things that worked out, a masterclass, if you will, by former GM Brian McClellan. So let's dive into the latest and talk about the season that was for Dylan Strome. And he had himself a year. That's how I'm just going to start here. He hit the point per game mark for the first time in his career. And what was so special about the 24-25 season is all the different Capitals players that put up career best numbers. And Dylan Strome did just that as well. 29 goals, 53 assists. That is good for 82 points. And there's more. He led the Caps in scoring, and the power play numbers are, well, just as good. And make no mistake about it, Alex Ovechkin accomplished great things last season, and a lot of that was due in part to Dylan Strome. The Capitals played solid throughout the season last season, and Dylan Strome was at the center of it. And, you want to take a look at more advanced metrics as well. He tallied 34 power play points. That's more than, well, McDavid, Marner, and Draisaitl. Yeah, that group. And he is the guy who assisted on Ovi's historic goal number 895. That's got to be one of the highlight reels in his head when he thinks about his NHL career, that he's done a lot, but assisting on Alex Ovechkin's number 895, yeah, that's got to be up there. So his name's etched in history as well. So that is just what he's doing. And that's why I feel confident about next season. We still have Strome. We still have Ovechkin. We still have Wilson and whoever else might be on that first line right wing. That it is a dynamic group. And the guy that stirs the drink at that first line center position is none other than Dylan Strome. But here's where things get interesting a little bit. The underlying numbers weren't exactly glowing. And what do I talk about here? His relative expected goals for is what I'm talking about here. Translation, when he was on the ice at 5-on-5, the team wasn't generating the same quality chances compared to when he was off. That's interesting and something that sometimes doesn't make sense. And the names around him, that's interesting as well. That when you think about players and how they've knocked it out of the park, to have that one interesting stat that isn't exactly shining, that makes you wonder. Now, was that all Strome's fault? Probably not. Remember, he was the most centered with Alex Ovechkin. And like we said in segment one, Ovechkin tends to tank expected goal numbers while still finishing chances. So you understand a bit of a question mark, and then it's explained that sometimes you have to read into the numbers and what do they actually mean. That is what I'm trying to do in this episode when I'm trying to break it down to a granular level about the first line in this episode. So the question is Strome a passenger or is he an engine? I mean, his production is real. The power play playmaking is legit. But the 5-on-5 question is fair. And now that we've got Pierre-Luc Dubois in the fold, do you keep Strome with Ovi or spread the wealth and try him with someone like Wilson or McMichael? That is an intriguing question to answer. We have seen bits of that. I think that, ultimately, of course, it'll be Strome that's going to start the season with Alex Ovechkin. And say for some reason that is less than stellar, Pierre-Luc Dubois could have a kick at the can on that first line. To be honest with you, when I heard that Pierre-Luc Dubois was coming to the Capitals, that's kind of where I had him penciled in. It's just a luxury of wealth that you can have Strome, Pierre-Luc Dubois, question mark at third line center, and Nick Dowd on the fourth line center. Really, really solid down the center, except for 3C. And I think we kind of know where that's headed as well. So let me throw this to y'all. What's Dylan Strome's ceiling really? What we saw from him last season, is that the peak? Is that the pinnacle? Or is he still growing? And is it possible that he could even up his game a little bit more if he did play on the second line surrounded by, let's say, McMichael, Wilson, or Protas, something like that? You got to think that playing on that first line with Alex Ovechkin and all that entails, that's pretty good. But is it possible that he could up his metrics in other regards playing on, let's say, the second line? something to ponder, and maybe we'll actually get a look at that next season. He is a 1C on a playoff team or more of a power play weapon who needs strong line mates to thrive. That's a question that we don't know for sure. But all things considered, 30,000-foot view, I like the game that Dylan Strome brings to the Capitals. And again, a guy that, was discarded by the Chicago Blackhawks, has been nothing but a knockout for the Capitals and took it to the next level, even greater than what we've seen from him before this last season. Just a testament of how well the Capitals played last season, and makes you wonder what to expect from this team and Dylan Strome next season. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Tom Wilson and how he is maturing into a great player, putting up over 30 goals last season. What is the secret behind his success? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. So in the final segment of the show today, we are going to talk about good old number 43, Tom Wilson. And what's the book on him? Of course, what do we know is that he was a guy that entered the league with led with a physical flair, shall we say. He fought everyone. He finished his hits. He threw players on the ice, and subsequently, he was the guy that faced supplemental discipline. He was the guy that's spent a lot of time in the penalty box. And also a player that the talk out there is that if he did not clean up his act, he could get kicked out of the league. Fast forward to modern times, and he is the heir apparent for being the captain of the Capitals once Alex Ovechkin hangs up the skates. And he's leaning more into being a great goal scorer than trying to drop the mitts at a moment's notice to try to fight every fourth line AHL call-up there is out there. He will if he has to, but his game has evolved. And like he told Mike Vogel on the Break the Ice podcast, he realized he was better served playing on the ice, scoring goals, than he was in the penalty box watching his teammates play. So let's talk about Tom Wilson, a guy that spent a good chunk of his season playing that first line right wing, playing with Strome and Alex Ovechkin, and how much of playing on that first line led to his success. Let's dive into that in the final segment. And Tom Wilson had a massive bounce back year. 33 goals, 32 assists, 65 points. First time he's ever cracked 30 goals. What's the common theme there? Players putting up career numbers. That is what a lot of Capitals did this past season. First time he's looked like that guy since the Cup year, all the way back in 2018. And it wasn't just brute force, it was smart, skilled hockey. And that's what the rest of the NHL doesn't like. They want to paint him into a corner saying he's just a tough guy. Oh, quite contraire. Wilson also cleaned up his penalty minutes down to 100 PIMs from 133 the year before. Still rough, still rugged, but more calculated. And when the postseason came, Wilson was everywhere, especially against the Canadiens. Tom Wilson, along with, a lot of the other Capitals, we wanted to see more from them in the second round against the Canadiens, but all things considered, a big contributor. He had 7 points in 10 games, including that huge hit on Carrier. So when you take a look at it, he answered the bell when needed to. And let's get to the numbers. That's what we're talking about in this episode, is numbers. And we're talking about expected goals for percentage when we're talking to him, around 53%. Positive, not elite, but good. And the other numbers that we're talking about, relative expected goals for, also positive, which means the team got better chances when Wilson was on the ice. He even built some chemistry with PLD late in the year, which raises a question. again about the possibility of Wilson, either playing on the second line or Pierre-Luc Dubois playing on the first line, whatever the case might be, that two big frames out there can really clear the lane for a guy like Connor McMichael, for example. And, like I say, Wilson can score goals in his own right. We saw that from PLD as well. But I think that having those big frames out there is oftentimes advantageous for the Capitals. But what's the best spot for Wilson next season? Do you keep him on the top line? Again, I think that, there's a lot of questions out there. Where does Ryan Leonard fit in? Is he going to be the third line guy with Justin Sordiff on the fourth line right wing? Maybe, but Ryan Leonard might surprise people and they might try to take a look at Leonard higher up in the lineup. I think that is a bit of a question mark in general. The right wing, where are people going to slot in? A lot will be determined in camp. That much I know for certain. Do you slide him with Dubois and give him some teeth, if you will? And who rounds out that line? McMichael, Protas. It's going to be an exciting time as a Capitals fan to see how all of this thing materializes. And this might be Wilson's final year without wearing the captain's C. In a lot of ways, I expect that he will be the captain in the following season. And, he's deserving of it. He has the leadership qualities. Current captain Alex Ovechkin has said as much. And we're headed for a transition. And Tom Wilson is likely the next face of the franchise, much to the chagrin of other hockey fans around the NHL. He is deserving of it, a dynamic player that I think is going to take the Capitals to greatness and is going to be the leader for a team that is going to see, quite an influx of youth on this team. So it's an exciting time. And Tom Wilson, like I said, like a lot of other Capitals, put up career numbers. I expect to see his game grow even more next season. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On NHL as they have you covered 5 days a week, available wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.